KoitCast. Today's guest has been investigating the paranormal for over 30 years. He has written extensively on the subject, including many books and the X-File column for the Glasgow Evening Times. Please give a massive Koit welcome to Ron Halliday. Hi Ron, and welcome to KoitCast.
Hi there, Paul.
Thank you for coming, it's much appreciated. Let's jump in with who are you, where are you from, all that stuff about you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Ron Halliday. I've been interested in the paranormal, supernatural, for a good chunk of my life, and I live in Scotland, a place called Bridge of Allan, which is just outside Stirling, in the central part of Scotland. Yeah, so I've been living here for quite a few years now. I used to work up at Stirling University, but these days I'm retired, so I've had more time to devote to investigating and writing about the supernatural.
Super. So what got you into the paranormal? What was your introduction?
Yeah, well, I had, as I said, I've been, had a long-term interest in it. Interestingly for me, my grandmother, she came from further up in Scotland, north of Scotland. She was kind of medium, psychic medium. So, and she was forever seeing spirits of the departed. But my dad was a scientist, and but he was interested in psychical research. And so he had various books about the house, which I kind of sneaked in to read when I was a child and kind of terrified myself at an early age, so I kind of
Yeah.
had background in it.
Yeah, that's nice to have that the mix, isn't it? So you've got the one, your mum, who's all the psychical, and then your dad, who's the scientist. That is the perfect sides of the coin, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it is because it gives you a kind of a two-sided approach to it. I mean, on the one hand, there are people, seeing, most claiming to see spirits of the dead, and then on the other hand, you've got a kind of analysis of it, weighing it up. I mean, how much reliance can you place on eyewitness account or people's claims to be in touch with the dead? So, I mean, it's an interesting comparison. So I'm not skeptical about it because of, some of the things I've been involved in. But I mean, I've always kind of tried to step back a bit from it and weigh things up and, not just accept everything that people say, even though they might believe they've had a strange experience or a out of the world experience. I think you have to be realistic about it and accept that sometimes people make mistakes or misinterpret things. So yeah, I mean, I just find it really a fascinating part of my life to be involved in it all.
What was your first actual interaction yourself with it? So when you became an investigator, or what led you to become an investigator specifically, other than your background?
Well, I was interested in it, but I started writing about it, and I had some articles published in the newspapers, and through that, I came in contact with people who were actually investigating. I was writing about things in the past or just things in general. I came across people that had actually been already involved in investigating, or had actually had contemporary experiences. So it was. And kind of got involved with these individuals, So I kind of got into it through that, through the kind of spectrum of coming in as being a writer on the fact. I've been interested in it all for a long time, but never actually having investigated anything until I got a little bit older, and got involved through that because I found it fascinating that people had these experiences which were hard to explain away in natural everyday terms. So I got into it through that channel, if you like.
So let's hit down that channel then, the writing side of things, and dive into some of your books. So I came across one of your books that said "Famous Scots and the Supernatural."
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So can you run through a couple of cases from this book, and then we can discuss from there, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of the famous Scots, a lot of the Scots will actually be, well known by readers, probably across the world. I mean, I obviously was quite interested in the ones who were more were well known. I focused it on that. for example, John Logie Baird, the inventor of television. Well, there was somebody he would never have thought would have been interested in the supernatural, but he actually went along to spiritual seances and claimed that Edison had come through, Thomas Edison, the inventor, had come through and was giving him some advice on how to develop his television plans for television. And so, and he, if he delved further back into his life, he actually believed he'd seen ghosts. In fact, he thought at one point they'd actually seen the ghost of himself in the future as an old man when he was looking out the window of his house. So, and he, he thought maybe through television you might be able to contact, spirits of the dead, because this would be not just a question of speaking to spirits of the dead, actually bringing them through a scientific medium. So, if you like, actually proving the existence of the spirit world. So that was, that was one. Going even further back, William Wallace, well-known Scottish hero. There was lots of tales associated with him and the supernatural. That he'd fought with a headless individual, that he'd seen ghosts, that he'd actually had this. It was almost like he went into a trance in a church, and he had this experience where an object, a blazing object, came down from the sky, landed on a hill, and out of this object came a woman carrying a sword. And so you get this interesting mix of, more contemporary character, Logie Baird, and somebody from the past, or having this kind of involvement with the supernatural. So I found this whole thing fascinating. And, there's a whole range of other people who had supernatural experiences. Hugh Dowding, who was in command of the RAF, the fighter aspect of the RAF. Well, he actually became almost like a new ager, and his wife, Muriel Dowding, she was actually a psychic. And she actually wrote a book about her psychic experiences. So, there was a lot of people who are well known who were actually involved or interested in the supernatural. And that's what I was trying to get across. Because, I believe, the supernatural has been written out of history, certainly been written out of people's experiences, well-known people's experiences. And that's what I was trying to get across by looking at a range of characters, Robert Burns, Ramsay MacDonald, the Prime Minister. He was interested in the supernatural, went to seances. He even wrote a foreword to one of the well-known spiritualists of the time's book on her spiritual experiences. So, there's a lot going on there, which has been, it's like Newton and, his interest in astrology, which, scientists get embarrassed about. But, to something like Newton, this supernatural or, astrology stuff was as important to him as his scientific research. And it's not a question whether you believe that people had these experiences, but what I was trying to say was, that people did have an interest, were involved in these kind of things, and it's part of their personal history. But, you search through history books to find out any reference to this when you read about these individuals.
Yeah. Are all of these individuals molded by something? Are they nudged in a direction, do you think?
I think they could be. I think it's this issue of, what you may personally have experienced or what you feel about things, that you might decide, there's something else to life apart from the ordinary everyday. So they kind of pick things up. Like in the case of Ramsay MacDonald, his wife died young. He was very much in love with her. She died young. And of course, in that sense, he actually felt she was walking beside him as a spirit, and even actually being in his rooms at times. And I think that, event, he might not have been interested in spiritualism before, but I think that event kind of pushed him into getting involved in spiritualism and, accepting some of the things that spiritualists were telling him as in fact true. So I think it maybe does take a little bit of something sometimes to push people things. And in case of Logie Bird, I mean, I think he'd had these ghostly experiences, or felt he'd had these ghostly experiences as a child, and it kind of built up from there. So I suspect, like everything in life, it maybe takes something to happen to actually push you into an interest or involvement in the supernatural. And and not maybe not everybody gets that kind of nudge. If they do have that experience, if they see a ghost, they just dismiss it or don't want to get involved. But I think probably something has to happen to get you involved or interested in these kind of things.
Well, take the interest aside. If you look at Logie Baird as an example, if he was, I'll say struggling, I don't know the word, it might not be right. Say he was not ready to tick it over the line to form the complete television, and it wasn't until he had that scenario that nudged him onto the right path. What does that tell you about the nudge? Does it tell you that, no, we need you to do this television because it's a step along the way, which almost then signifies an agenda behind the scenes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that is one of the puzzles of it all, isn't it? One of the things that's so mystifying and so interesting in this whole issue of what is a supernatural. I mean, how does it affect people? Is there something out there that is, if you like, setting a plan for people or helping people along? I mean, mediums will say they've got a spirit guardian or some kind of gatekeeper or something who's sort of controlling what spirits come through to them, or so they don't, if you like, get involved with evil spirits, and they can get involved in good spirits, they can debate, whether those kind of things exist. But yeah, I mean, I think, there could well be some kind of influence on people that, if you like, pushes them in a certain direction, or gives them some idea of what direction to go in. I mean, I don't know if it's like coming back to this issue of guardian angels. Do we all have a guardian angel who's looking over us and making sure that we don't come to any harm or trying to protect us? So, I mean, I think there obviously must be some interaction going on here between the spirit world or other worlds are out there and humanity. And but that may focus on, some people may be aware of it. So there may be some kind of focus on those people who are aware of it, but maybe it affects us all, but we don't know it. I mean, been along to spiritualist meetings from time to time. I used to go a lot more, but I do occasionally. And I got messages in the past, and one of the messages was that my grandfather was kind of looking after me. Now, as far as I knew, he had absolutely no interest in spiritualism. He was more of a businessman, so he's kind of practical, down to earth person. And so I find that a bit odd. So I mean, I wouldn't like to dismiss this kind of idea that people out there, in other worlds, are looking after us, because I think there's a possibility, and you can understand why those who have gone before us, if they are out there, would take an interest in our lives and try to do the best for us.
Yeah, there's two ways of looking at it. Is that exactly what you said there? As in, they've died and they're like trying to look after us because we're their lineage and all that sort of stuff, possibly. Yeah. And then the second thing is what Steve Mera and I have talked about a couple of times, that it's a managed universe. So this, we're being pushed in a direction whether we know it or not.
Yeah.
To whatever end, we don't know. I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can see that aspect of it. I mean, there could be some giant cosmic plan out there that we're all involved in. We're all part of the cosmos, and that we're being pushed in that direction. I mean, the only thing I'll say, Paul, is that you get so many different opinions about what's going on. I mean, as you will know, every other person you speak to takes a bit of a different view on things, or a refined view on things. But to my mind, a plan, I mean, you kind of, I think, you can sense there's something going on that we're all part of, and we're all going in a certain direction. But to actually be sure about what that direction is. I'm not, I'm not certain, because there are people who tell you, well, there are evil spirits out there, and there are evil spirits trying to, push us in or pull us in a certain way, which is bad for us. And then other people say, yeah, but there are good spirits combating the evil spirits. So it's a universe where there's a battle going on, and somehow we on Earth are kind of in the thick of this struggle for supremacy or whatever. And so you can get all kinds of ideas. If I'm being honest about it, I am not absolutely sure which scenario I would take as one that's definitely been shown to be the correct one. And I mean, I'm always willing to be convinced by people's ideas or listen to people's ideas on it, because I don't think anybody on Earth can be sure about what's happening. I know some spirit mediums will kind of tell you, yeah, they definitely know what's happening. They're definitely in touch, with the best spirits in the whole universe. Well, so how can you be sure? You cannot be sure who or what you're dealing with. And you might think you're dealing with somebody who's claiming to be a good spirit, but you don't know that for a fact. So I mean, I don't know. I've heard so many, theories and ideas, and sort of heard people saying they've been attacked by spirits. Spirits are doing everything that's good for them. I mean, I don't know. I find it fascinating, but I find it quite a maze of opinions when it's difficult to be sure just one's the correct one. If there is a correct one, maybe there are several correct ones. There's multi-universes. There could be several correct ways that each universe is dealing with the people in it. It's
hard to know, isn't it? Almost impossible.
It is very hard to know, and I mean, I've heard some coherent theories. Stephen's, heard Stephen speak, obviously, and so I've heard coherent theories about it. But it's a possibility that there are other coherent ideas which are the correct ones.
Yeah. And one day we'll find out, hopefully.
I'd like to think that, there's quite a lot of investigation going on, as a lot more I've seen in recent years, even when I started out looking at things, and people are always coming up with ideas, coming up with more information. It's just trying to make sense of all those things that come out of, different writings, different investigations, trying to pull that all together into a coherent theory or coherent ideas about things, But as I said, I'm always interested in what people have to say about it.
Me too. I was alluding to the fact that one day I'm going to be dead. It's going to happen. And then will I find out then?
Yeah, well, that's the great imponderable, isn't it? As you well know, there are a large number of people out there who claim to be in contact with the spirits of the dead. I mean, interesting thing, what Aleister Crowley said, who certainly believed there were other worlds out there. He said, yeah, well, there may be other worlds out there. There may be another world, but it doesn't mean that we're all going to go to it. And I think that is a fair point. From somebody who seemed to spend a lifetime trying to be in contact with beings or entities from other worlds. However, messages come through. I've had the odd message which I found hard to believe didn't come from somebody from who knew about me and could tell me something that happened that I didn't believe it was possible for somebody not to know unless they had been supposedly standing, looking at me. But, beyond that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's any guarantee we will all go to a life beyond the grave. I do believe there are other things out there. I mean, I would accept that. I'm not disputing that. But what that is made up of, whether we actually journey there, I mean, I think that is, something that you have to actually rely on what mediums are maybe saying to you if they're being accurate about it. But, as they say, we'll only find out, once we've actually departed this life.
Yeah.
I hope there is, because, I mean, it will be fascinating. I mean, when you look at what some people like Swedenborg said about, the other world, that is just like this world. If there's schools, there's
Hmm.
Bible, there's, cafes, everything that we've got here is replicated there. And I mean, that would be fascinating, but I just wonder what that world would be like if it's just the same as here. You think, well, it might be, we hope it might be something a bit different.
I'd be hoping it's going to be fascinating either way, because it'll be fascinating if there is something after this life, and it's also completely fascinating if there is zero.
Yeah, yeah.
Only if there is zero, I won't be fascinated by it then, will I? 'Cause it won't exist. I think you alluded to this earlier. It was one of my questions anyway. Do you think that everyone, regardless of fame or not, is equally touched by the paranormal at one or more stages in their life?
Well, I would think so, absolutely. I mean, just look at the number of people who've had experiences of a ghost, for example, to take that example, there are masses of people. I mean, the number of things been written about must be tiny compared to the number of stories I've heard from people who've had kind of experiences of a ghost or of a UFO, for example. You can see that as part of the paranormal, which I tend to do. So I think practically everybody in one way or the other has had some experience of it. People say, oh, they felt something, they felt something and they were just touched on the back, or they just felt even a rush of wind of something and saw something move. I've heard so many accounts like that. I think everybody, in a sense, must have had some experience of the supernatural, whether they're willing to accept it as that or not. And as we've discussed before, I mean, it's possible there's some kind of supernatural, um, or some spirit or guardian angel or something actually being involved in everybody's life. I mean, I think it's a much wider. I think it's a much wider phenomenon that would appear. I know there's a lot of books been written recently. Appear in books, but I mean, it tends to be generally, ignored. I mean, I think people don't see it as part of their everyday life, and you can see an explanation for that because, maybe everyday life would become harder to deal with if we were thinking, yeah, well, the supernatural is part of this life. It's something that we can't control. It's like controlling us as someone we can't necessarily see or pin down, but it's having this impact on our lives. So, yeah, so I mean, I do believe that, the supernatural does have a much wider influence on our lives and, is generally accepted.
I've been pondering over like super hardened criminals. Even
Yeah.
they must be then at some stage in their life touched by the paranormal. It's just how they react to it or whether they accept it. That's what you're saying, yeah?
Absolutely. I think that is true because, I mean, some people are so focused on every day, maybe understandably, that there's no time or no part of their brain that's willing to accept, their outside influence. I mean, you meet people who are out and out skeptics. Fair enough. I mean, I'm not, I mean, that is always obviously their right to be skeptical, and I can understand skepticism. So some people just totally block it off, and no matter what experience they had, they would block it off. And my explanation for that is, people find it find it disturbing or disconcerting, to um, feel or think, there's something out there they can't control. I mean, the whole scientific thing is, yeah, we can control everything that goes on. And if we don't know how to control it today, we'll know how to control it tomorrow. So when people try to sort of integrate that with the supernatural, well, it seems, that you can't integrate it. And I think people sometimes just want to block that off and get on with their everyday lives. Want to think everything, fits into a little block or a box or whatever, so everything in a sense can be controlled. So I think some people do block these things out because, as I've said, they find it, a bit disconcerting. Something that's not in everyday reality, so therefore they can't control it. and it becomes something, they just want to push to one side and basically forget about.
Yeah, very interesting. Here's one for you. Obviously, well, no, I say obviously, a lot of your cases in the famous Scots and the Supernatural book presumably are older historical cases, yeah, rather than contemporary cases, presumably. Is that right?
Yep. That is correct. For the one good basic reason that, they don't want to go around libeling anybody. The
Yeah.
dead can't libel you. So you can deal with them and, and pull out all the bits of the supernatural they were involved in. Of course, some people have, Tony Blair's an obvious example, who it was claimed, they had some spiritual guru. So that, there are up-to-date cases. But, I think obviously, if you're sensible, you have to be careful about who or what you're writing about. People who are still around, who can turn around and, as it were,
Have a go. Yeah.
have a go, and then it is difficult, and I think it's in a way it's actually easy. I know it sounds odd, but I think it's actually easier sense to verify people from the past because there's stuff being written about them. There's quite a lot of material you can look at, and so you can actually build up a picture. Whereas as with contemporary people, there may be stuff written, but then it's actually hard to pin down, what is sheer exaggeration or stories made up. And as I've said, it's a simple issue. You don't want to upset people by making statements which they can contest, and well, basically put you down because of it. So I was just a bit wary about dealing with contemporary people. Obviously, there are one or two cases where Nancy Reagan and Reagan's wife in astrology. That is quite a well-known aspect of what the Reagans were about. But but I did focus on people from the past who I knew most people would be actually would be knowledgeable about, so recognize them fairly straightforwardly.
Yeah, the reason I went down that route to ask about the historical versus contemporary was to ponder this thought, which is, do you think the paranormal was more prevalent back, a while ago, let's just say 100 years ago and back, versus today, where there are more distractions with technology and stuff?
Well, I think there's always been an interest in the paranormal, but maybe just taken different forms over the years. I know. If you look at things today, there is still a lot being written about the paranormal. You just have a look at the internet. There's just masses of stuff. There's more books being churned out than ever on various aspects of the supernatural. So, I don't feel there's any less interest today. Maybe the interest has changed. People weren't writing about UFOs 100 years ago. There was a kind of focus on ghosts and poltergeist. I think the whole thing's broadened out, into a whole range, of things that have come up like reptilians, alien abductions, this whole kind of scenario. The Illuminati have sprung back into contention again. But that's a long-standing thing. So I don't think there's any less interest. I think the way it's being expressed or what's been focused on has definitely changed over the years. You mentioned technology. Well, UFOs are always an example of technology maybe having an impact on on the paranormal, in the sense that things that were maybe interpreted differently in the past are, the last 60 years being interpreted as alien spacecraft, for example. So I think things do change, perceptions change. You get a mix of, I've invested cases where UFOs plus what you might call nature spirits have been combined. So I think our perspective on it changes, but the supernatural itself still there. but we interpret it in different ways, or it takes different forms.
I agree with you on that one, by the way. Before we branch into UFOs, because I want to talk about the other book, which is The Secret History of Scotland's UFO Phenomenon, I think I had one more question regarding the famous Scots book. Yeah, is there a case in there that you investigated that struck out to you as really weird? An unusual case amongst that book?
An unusual case amongst that book. Trying to kind of think about that. I'm trying to think everybody who was actually involved who I wrote about. So have a look. I just a quick check.
Yeah, go for it.
Can't remember everybody I've covered, actually, funnily enough.
I can't remember yesterday, so I don't blame you.
I can't. Oh yeah, when yeah.
There's bound to be one that sticks out as uber odd.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of them actually. Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, I'll talk about Robert Burns, famous Scottish poet, because the thing about Burns, which is fascinating me, and just to me stands out, is that he has this reputation. He has a reputation as a kind of somebody who's interested in politics, and a lot of his poetry was inspired by politics, and he was very much involved in, if you like, standing out for the common man. This was, one of his things. He wanted to, if you like, press upon the world. That history and society is not just about the rich and the powerful. It's also about the common man as well. So there's a lot of focus on Burns as a kind of radical person. What misses out is his fascination with the supernatural. That he was so interested in the supernatural that this kind of inspired him to write his poetry. I mean, he was involved with the Masons, for example. I mean, he was somebody who actually believed in the spirit world, and this aspect of it, to my mind, was it was a driving force in what he was writing about. And his most famous poem, Tam O'Shanter, is actually about somebody being confronted by ghosts and being chased by ghosts. And, he did see phantoms from the spirit world. But this is so totally ignored. And that's what I find so frustrating about these things. Even though a lot of stuff has been written about him, this aspect is completely missed out. And I find that the most weird thing in considering, he's supposed to be Scotland's greatest national poet, that this aspect of his life just gets pushed away. It's just, I find it so strange that there's this willingness just to forget about his interest in the paranormal and try and focus on things that, yeah, sure, they were important, but the supernatural was just as important, if not more important. So why does this kind of get pushed in the background?
I think you know the answer to that, don't you? Which is the people who write in about it don't want to be ridiculed themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I mentioned, you get this with Newton. You can read a biography of Newton and, they maybe mention it, but more like, this was some aberration on his part, that he was interested in astrology and the influence of the planets on people's lives, But as he said, well, I've studied it and you haven't. That's why he believed that it did have an influence on people's lives.
And that's, in a way, that's one of the worst things about dying, is that when you're dead, you can't come back and say, actually, no, my intentions was this. Stop talking about me as if I thought this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, that's right. I know you won't be able to come back and, tell people exactly what's going on. I mean, spirit mediums obviously claim they are in touch with people, but, as you say, you won't be able to, unless there's a definite attempt via a medium to contact, one of your dead relatives, then, you're never gonna hear from them. Which obviously is, a bit disappointing. But I'm sure those in the spirit world will say, well, anyway, you'll find out when you're here. So,
Or not. Yeah.
so don't worry about it for the time being.
Right, let's branch into your UFO Scotland book. So it's The Secret History of Scotland's UFO Phenomenon. So from this book, can you tell us about the Lossymouth alien? Because this one doesn't ring a bell to me.
No, well, that's right, because this is the one which supposedly was invented by Patrick Moore. There was a big controversy about this whole story, and that it actually been made up or invented and wasn't actually a real event. And that was the reason why I mentioned it, because it probably isn't well known these days, but I think there was in the past a fair amount written about it. It was one of these debates whether this had actually occurred or was it just invented. And I think the overall feeling was that, this story actually had been invented. And Patrick Moore, the astronomer chap,
Astronomer,
his
yeah.
name was thrown into it as somebody who was, involved in it. And there was nobody called Allingham who supposedly had, been involved in this at all. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting from the point of view of something that probably never happened, but was claimed to have happened for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know why people would make things up like that, but, these things do happen, as we all know. But
Well,
yeah,
what was the story then? Because I'm at a loss to understand the history of it.
supposedly this spaceship had landed. We're talking about one back in the 1950s. Supposedly the spaceship had landed. This alien got out, claimed he was from Mars, and was chatting to this guy who happened to be there. And so he got this story about this this alien life on Mars, and that was really about the sum of it. But it was told, it was written about, and it became sort of something that was controversial. And as I say, it is probably regarded these days as fiction or made up. But I haven't been, obviously, because I am back then. I mean, I haven't actually been able to interview any witness on the case, but I just added in as something of interest, given the controversy about it.
Okay, that's fair enough. Now, why is the book called The Secret History of Scotland? So what does that allude to?
Well, I mean, that alludes to the fact that it's kind of a hidden history that it's not widely talked about. People may be not aware of it, but in fact, there has been a lot of UFO cases in Scotland, and I was obviously interested in bringing it to the notice of the public. That Scotland had been part of the whole UFO scene. I mean, the first reported case was as far back as July 1947, when the whole UFO thing kind of sprang into existence, so to speak. So, I mean, yeah, there'd been a long history of UFO contact. In fact, there was even a UFO society active in the late 50s, 60s. So I wanted to bring out that and draw people's attention to the not just the number of cases, but the type of cases, the kind of alien encounter cases that people had experienced, and put Scotland's experience into the wider context of UK and even the world experience, that this phenomenon was worldwide, and that there were examples of what was going on within Scotland itself. So we were kind of, Scotland was kind of part of this whole phenomenon, and to deserve to be known, people should be made aware of it, and so I was pleased to be able to get it out, and obviously that some people were reading it was even better.
That always helps. Which case then struck out to you as probably the one that gives most credence to the phenomenon or most evidence surrounding it?
Yeah, well, to my mind, there's two or three that stand out, but I mean,
Okay.
yeah, but I mean, the probably I'll say the best known one, certainly the most written about one, was the Bob Taylor case in Livingston in 1979, November 9th, 1979. Bob Taylor was a forestry worker. He was doing his rounds around this wood, which was part of the Forestry Commission, just outside the town of Livingston in central Scotland. And as he was walking around, he suddenly was confronted by this hovering object, which I'd say. It was this kind of spherical object. Seems to have a rim round it, although there's some disagreement as to exactly what it looked like. But as he stood there watching, obviously it was transfixed because, I thought, what on earth is this? Nothing like I'd ever seen before. As he stood there, two spiky balls came out each side of this object and rolled towards him. And they came right up to him and grabbed him by the trouser legs. And the next thing he remembers is waking up. A strange smell in his nostrils. Got up. He had a dog with him. The dog was barking. He staggered back to his lorry, driven up in a lorry, but he couldn't get the lorry started. So he actually walked home, which was about a mile or something. When he got home, he said to his wife he'd been attacked by a spacecraft. And his wife said, "Oh, there's no such things." But anyway, she rang up his boss. They called the police. They thought maybe he'd been attacked by, hooligans or whatever, some individual. So a lot of things rolled on from there. The police came, investigated the whole word, couldn't find any evidence that anybody else had been there. But they did find tracks in the ground where Bob had said he'd seen this particular object. So there seemed some kind of, verification that something had been there. But the case did rely on Bob's experience. And everybody who knew Bob and everybody who's talked to him, he died a few years ago, talked to him, was convinced that he was telling the truth in terms of what he had seen. That he'd seen this hovering object, that he'd seen these spiky balls come out, he'd had some really strange experience. But then people disagreed on what that was. Some suggestions, things like he'd had an epileptic fit and he imagined he'd seen this thing, but he had no particular history of being unwell. So although there was only one witness to this case, a lot of the belief in it came from Bob himself, the character of the chap. He'd not had any interest in UFOs before. He had no interest in UFOs after. When I interviewed him twice, and on both occasions, he was totally sincere, in my view, but a lot of other people were the same, totally sincere in that he had seen this particular object. And he said he was amazed by it. He thought it was a wonderful experience. But but beyond that, he took no further interest in any type of UFO subject. He was just convinced that he'd had this out-of-world experience and one that fascinated him. So as I said, a lot of that depends on your belief in his character, because he's the only person who saw it. But there was, even amongst skeptics, a belief that something strange had happened to him. A chap called Stuart Campbell wrote a book about UFO mysteries solved, and he was the one who made the suggestion that Bob had an epileptic fit triggered by a mirage of Venus. He said, Yeah, but what I'm saying is, even there was no, he believed something had happened to Bob, but there was different interpretations of it. As I said, I spoke to Bob, and I was convinced that he'd seen whatever this object was. He'd actually seen this object, and he'd had this experience. So I find that certainly one of the compelling cases as far as I'm concerned, and one that's very hard even for skeptics to explain away.
Well, there's the trousers, isn't there? Because I spoke to Malcolm Robinson actually about this case, and he was telling me all about the trousers and the cut, and all the skeptics can't get past that because it's done in a certain way.
That's correct.
Like ripped upwards or something, when it vertically.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously you'll know, because once you speak to the people, and you've not only got body language, you've got their verbiage, you've got how they act, in your heart if someone's telling you the truth or not, or if someone's obfuscating. And your heart said he was telling the truth.
Yeah, but he did. Yeah, I know people will say, "Oh, well, you're just hearing somebody's version of things," but the whole judicial system, in a way, it relies on witness evidence. I know witness evidence can be faulty, but it relies on witness evidence. So, I mean, the same applies, when you speak to people, I mean, you can generally tell when people are making things up or exaggerating, but Paul always stuck to this story. And, when he moved out to a place called Blairgowrie in his later years, and I visited him up there, and he said, he said, I never made a penny out of this story, He said, other people made money out of it. But he said, I never made a penny out of it, He said, I wasn't interested in making anything out of it. I was only interested because I had this strange experience. And, when you spoke to him, you could see the enthusiasm on his face and, the fascination in him. When he recounted this experience that he'd had. Yeah, to him, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And, and I just felt, if you couldn't believe him, then you couldn't believe anybody. He was so convincing about it, with no reason, with no reason to make anything up and exaggerate. And I mean, he always stuck to this account of what had happened to him.
It's interesting that he said it was a wonderful experience, considering it was considered an attack. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. That is, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, he had this attack on him, but he was so fascinated by what he'd seen that, he never seemed to dwell on that aspect of it. Funnily enough, he didn't dwell on it. I mean, he just thought, this thing had happened to him. It was an amazing thing that had happened to him. And, I mean, I got the impression that he was almost glad he'd had this experience because it had been such something, that had really, if you like, stood out in his life. And he was quite, astonished about it. I mean, anyway, the times I spoke to him, he never tried to turn it into any philosophy about it. He didn't try to say, yeah, well, this is just part of this wonderful UFO invasion. I mean, he never went into anything like that. All he ever did when I spoke to him anyway was to talk about this experience that he'd had, and that, he thought it had something from outside this world, had come down at that particular time. So
did he ever extrapolate out what he thought their intentions were?
No, he didn't. No, not to me anyway. Maybe it is to other people, but he didn't to me. I mean, he didn't sort of say, maybe they're trying to invade or maybe they're trying to take over the world or, anything like that. I mean, the times I spoke to him, he just wasn't interested in the whole UFO scene. I mean, he didn't try to turn it into, as I've said, some kind of philosophy or some kind of extensive explanation of what was happening. I mean, not to me anyway. Maybe he did to other people, but I can only obviously talk about the experience I had in speaking to him.
Do you think that having that attitude towards the phenomenon, the idea of the phenomenon, is what makes that case stand out as being better? I.e., imagine if he'd have been, yeah, it's amazing, it's the best thing, and then he was uber enthusiastic about it. Does that then make it sound like it's made up more?
I mean, I think it could do. I mean, of course, when you have to say people interpret in different ways, but, my experience of speaking to people who have had experiences in general are quite subdued about it. In the sense, they've had this experience, it's difficult to explain. I mean, I can just maybe talk about another experience that somebody had. They were driving, it was a woman, Pat McLeod had written about it. She was driving along on a busy Edinburgh road. As she was driving along, she saw this light in the sky, and this light got bigger and bigger. And then this large object, flew over in front of the car. She said it was like Saturn, had a rim around it, and was sort of blazing. In the middle of it was blazing. It moved over, and it seemed to land on, grass on the other side of the road. So she stopped the car, went over to take a look, and there was nothing there. And so she was perplexed. Anyway, this ended up in the papers. Not one other person came forward to say they'd seen this object, and she could not understand, why nobody else had seen it, because it's been so prominent. And after that, because of that, she then began to wonder about it. She was quite subdued about it. She didn't want to talk about it. And I found that people do can react in that way. They've had this weird experience and think, oh, geez, that's amazing. And then nobody else has seen it, or they start to think, well, have maybe even have doubts about what they've experienced. So, I mean, it's rare. In my experience, it's rare to have people, yahoo, I've had this brilliant experience. I've heard one or two people have said it was uplifting. They saw an object, and gosh, it was like a spiritual uplifting experience. But I've not found, many people who've been, well, I would say exuberant about it. I would say it's been a little, a bit subdued. But then again, I mean, maybe other people have had different experiences with people.
Yeah, true. True. Now, I want to get onto something that I think is in this book. I saw something online where you stated you believe that standing stone structures are ancient defences against alien invasions. And I love the sound of that thought. So can you go more into that?
Yeah, well, the papers exaggerated slightly, but
Oh, did they? Swines.
Well, exaggerated, but I did. But what I was, I was talking in a general context. We took things not out of context, but we kind of. What I was saying was, I was looking at some of these. I don't know if you're familiar with, some of the prehistoric monuments in Scotland. But I was focusing on two things. One, I was focusing on certain things like Scarabray, where they were like underground, if you like, on buildings that were underground, though they were covered over anyway. And a place called Maze Howe, which is like a giant, again covered over too. And what I was saying was, these might have been, there's a possibility that these might have been places where people sheltered from attack. And I've used the comparison, if you look at Africa when the Europeans were taking over, or trying to take over parts of Africa, you had these cases where, like, the British were using, aircraft or go around machine gunning villages. And so you had this massive modern technology against, comparative primitive technology. And what I was saying was, well, maybe there's a comparison with ancient ancestors, that they were being attacked from the air, and so they built these defenses to protect themselves from that. On the standing stones issue, what I was saying was that standing stones could be, we've talked about ley lines in the past, could be some kind of focus, some kind of ring of power, which people were using possibly for defense, possibly for contact. So I was looking at it from that kind of angle. When you look at some of the forts, they've got these vitrified stones which have been burnt, melted by absolute huge amount of temperature, huge rise in temperature, which seems impossible to melt. I mean, I know archaeologists have tried it and they haven't really succeeded. So it suggests there was maybe some kind of huge heat was actually used, melted these stones. And so, we could be talking about advanced weapons being involved here. And that was a kind of a scenario I was trying to put across, that you cannot just accept that we know about the past, because a lot about the past, we don't know. And if you even talking about things like the pyramids, people put forward various suggestions for that. So I was kind of looking at it in that way, because there was contact between, Orkneys, where Maze Howe and Scarabray are, and ancient Egypt, it seems, which, seems was something that's only really come out fairly recently. So, I mean, I was looking at it in that context and trying to think out of the box. What were these ancient buildings used for? Were they used for something that maybe, we're just simply not aware of? And trying to, if you like, say, point out that, we look at our ancient past, we don't really know a lot about it. And so, let's take a different look at things and see we've got some other possible explanations for these structures.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's no harm playing out a theoretical in your mind as to what it could have been, because no one's going to give you the definitive, are they? Unless we find some evidence that says it 100% is X. So I know I like playing out theories anyway in the mind, and who's to say yours isn't, or that theory isn't Correct.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, some people did, of course, and
Yeah. They need a backhand.
it didn't meet with universal approval. But I mean, but
Well,
what does?
Sodom.
Yeah. Anyway,
It's possible. I mean, you look at like the city of, what is it, Derinkuyu, I think it is, that city that's underground. Why is that a city underground? There's going to be protection from something.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I wish I'd brought that in when I think about it. Yeah. No. Yeah. That's right. I know.
You never know. You never know.
You never know. You never know.
But very interesting. Let's move into another book of yours called, is it Muck X?
McX. Yes.
Playing on the Scottish theme there.
Yeah.
This is more about what you would class as the Scottish X-Files. So presumably this covers all sorts of things. Does it, like ghosts and demons and everything?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was. So I didn't write it all, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a mixture. I wrote about half it, and edited the rest. Yeah, I mean, it just covers various kind of themes, within Scotland and the supernatural. Ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs, and crop circles, which were kind of current at the time, and one or two straightforward things, one unsolved crimes. So it was a kind of mixture of the time. Yeah, but again, I mean, we hadn't really had anything like that for a long time written in Scotland. So I was happy again to bring out some of these instances and cases and bring them together in a book that give some people insight into the whole range of the supernatural. So I mean, to my mind, if these things aren't written about, if they're not made into a book or into articles, then things get lost and forgotten about. And you're trying to bring it into people's minds, into their knowledge, that there are things going on there that can't be explained. And it's such a fascinating thing. Gives us a different insight into our lives.
Well, you know what I'm going to ask you now, don't you? Which is, give me a good case from that book. The one where obviously you wrote half of it, so give me your favourite from that book, if you remember again.
Yeah, I'm trying to just check again. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yes. Right, okay. I know. Well,
Good.
obviously one of my favourites, which I've been fascinated about for years, is Loch monsters.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, Loch Ness is the one gets all the attention because of Nessie, so called. And but I mean, Loch monsters actually are more common than that, but less well known. The one that we investigated, and Malcolm was along there with me. We went up to Loch Mora, which is further up north. It's the deepest loch in the UK. It's over 1,000 feet plus deep. So it's by far the deepest loch in Scotland. And there is a monster there, allegedly called Morag. And less well known, as I've said, but nonetheless, this has this reputation. Morag the monster. And there was a case in the 1990s when the two brothers who used to sail the loch quite frequently, they were sailing on one day and they saw these waves. It seemed like something was moving under the water. And the next minute, bang, this thing hit the boat, jerked them around. They seemed to be circling around in them, trying to chase them. So they were trying to sort of push themselves away, and get away from it. And then eventually it sort of went underneath and disappeared. So this did eventually get into the papers after a while. And of course, then further reports came in. But I mean, this was a long-standing tradition. There was a monster there. And, deer carcasses have been found by the side of the loch, which has been interpreted as, the monster actually grabbing these deers, because they do so in the loch, grabbing these deers and eating them. But, beyond that, there are several lochs in Scotland which have a well-known monster. St Mary's Loch in the Borders and just very close to the English border. That has allegedly got a monster in it. And then you have this whole thing about kelpies, the seahorses that look like horses, but they're actually monsters which will eat you up and take you away. The tradition is that, you'll come along and you'll find a pleasant looking horse by the side of the loch like a pony. And then all of a sudden it'll grab you and turn into a monster and drag you down into the loch and, kill you and eat you up. So the Loch Monster thing was quite fascinating because, it just isn't focused on the Loch Ness Monster, which has so many sightings, but never been actually captured, which makes you wonder, what are Loch Monsters? And in my view, this is a supernatural phenomenon. I don't believe that there's a solid creature there, because I can't understand how, if there is, it hasn't actually been caught. But I do believe that something has been going on, because there's so many sightings of things there, that there must be something to the story. So I think this could be some kind of supernatural phenomenon, in the sense that, it could be another window into the past or into something else. I mean, this might explain why people keep seeing things, but nothing, despite all the investigation, despite trawling the loch, people standing at the side of the loch for 20 years looking for something, nothing has ever been, definitively seen, and more importantly, never been captured or, as it were, properly traced, on radar or anything like that. So that was one of the reasons why I wrote, about the Loch Monster kind of thing. Firstly, to say, well, it's not just Loch Ness. There's general association with lochs in Scotland, and as you know, in Wales, in England, and especially Canada, with the Great Lakes there and all that kind of stuff. So there is a kind of, again, a worldwide tradition on it. But what is it? I mean, nobody's caught these things. You could argue about the quality of the photos, even the video evidence. What is it actually showing? But if there's something there, it could be this supernatural phenomena rather than an actual physical animal being there. I mean, physical maybe in the sense that something's appearing there and then disappearing through some kind of window or some kind of tunnel into another universe or world or something like that. I mean, again, you're thinking out of the box, but if there's going to be an explanation for something like that, then the explanation, has to be out of the box.
Exactly. I mean, there's two ways I think about loch monsters. One is exactly what you've just said. It could be a portal to somewhere. It could just be something happening in that region that allows an ancient, I don't know, let's just call it a dinosaur for want of a better term, comes through for a period of X seconds and then, buggers off. Could be that. But then the other part of me, the devil's advocate part of me, says, look, it's clearly made up. There's nothing there. And everything from the Kelpie is their stories to keep children safe from falling in the lochs, which we know are deep.
Yeah.
So my question on that subject, if we're going down the devil's advocate route, will be, which came first, Loch Ness or the surrounding loch stories?
Yeah, well, that is a good question. Well, I think, if you look at the Loch Ness story, I mean, originally it stretches back to the 6th century when, God, who is it? I don't know what his name now. But anyway, he supposedly confronted this monster and chased it away, so there's a long-standing tradition there. But, I mean, it's well known that it was only in the 1930s when a road was built around the side of the loch that these stories started proliferating. And there's been some question about whether this was just done, and got into the newspapers to promote tourism. Because obviously people started pouring up afterwards to, it became more attractive. But as I've said, there are these other loch stories in other lochs like Loch Morra. That's a long-standing tradition. And down in the borders, I mentioned St. Mary's Loch. That's quite a long-standing tradition as well. So I think these stories are quite old stories. But obviously that doesn't mean that they're anything other than, I wouldn't say made up, but could be from misinterpretation of things.
Yeah.
Traditions build up round a loch and that. And bodies of water are always mysterious. I mean, aren't they? I mean, you don't know what's under there. You can quite easily make up stories about them or imagine things going on there. I mean, as I've said, there are these traditions associated with lochs, but we've never had anything definitive, in the sense that, despite all the investigation of Loch Ness, the other ones haven't been investigated to the same extent. There's been nothing solid discovered. So you are left with this dichotomy. Are these just stories? Are these just traditions with absolutely no basis in fact? Or are we dealing with something supernatural? And, because I'm interested in supernatural, I am open to the belief that there is something supernatural happening there. It's some kind of portal, some kind of window, things happen there, maybe because of the place that it is. Maybe water itself attracts something. There's been many reports over the years of balls of light going across lochs and other bodies of water. I mean, is it all connected with that? I mean, there's a lot of potential explanations. And as you said, one of the explanations is that there's nothing there and it is just all tradition and, imagination. But I'm inclined to think there's something going on there, to be honest, Paul.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, it reminds me of the other cryptid scenarios. You take Dogman, Bigfoot, all these things. They're similar vein stories, aren't they? There's no bodies, but everyone seems to think they see a physical thing and then all of a sudden it's not there. So are they windows, portals? Who knows? Very, very strange.
Yes.
Take all your books as a whole. What would you say is your best work book-wise, so that if we were to give people an entry into the Ron Halliday world, where should they start?
Okay, can I talk about my latest one, which I will
course.
briefly, which was Alien Spirits. This is a short book. It's only about 100 pages, but this documents the experiences I had with the medium Ray Todd, and Ray brought through these alien spirits in a physical sense, faces that you could actually see. It was like transfiguration, but very, very solid transfiguration. Faces would fall over his face. And so I saw there, apart from spirits of what must have been dead humans, also saw the spirits of alien beings of various kinds. And so, as I've said, this is my experience, but people have read it, found it quite fascinating, because I describe each seance that I was involved in and just exactly how this happened and my experiences with it. So, I mean, that, in a sense, though it's my shortest book by far, is one of my favourite books, because that is my own personal experience of the supernatural. I went there for a couple of years, so there's about 50 plus seances I've written up about, and documenting what happened there. And so, because I had that personal experience, in that sense, it is one of my favorite books. Apart from that, picking them out, I don't know.
No, that's okay. I think you've answered it. You've said that's your favorite book.
Answered it. Oh, yeah, good, yeah.
So that scenario, I'm now intrigued by. So you physically saw yourself, his face change.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And how did that strike you?
Totally stunned. Absolutely. Well, I was stunned, obviously. I just went on for 2 years. I saw all these faces. Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. Can I say, I was sitting, we sat there in broad daylight, I say broad daylight, it tended to be in the evening, but in light. It wasn't in some darkened room. We were only a few feet apart, maybe 4 or 5 feet apart. So I had an excellent view of what happened. And his face would gradually transform. Now, Ray rang me up one day. I had stuff in the papers, in the local papers. I'm in Edinburgh, Edinburgh Evening News. And he rang me up and said, "You see an alien. And your first impression is what?" you know,
Mm.
totally nothing. But anyway, I spoke to him for a minute or two, and I thought, well, what have I got to lose? I was interested in things, and I thought I'll go through. I had met one or two people who are a bit off the scale. So I was kind of used to dealing with people with extreme views on things, so to speak. Anyway, I went along, and I was there. I was in a few minutes. I started seeing faces, but the first faces that came through were like of dead, seemed like dead people. I was saying, they were formed. You could see everything: face, eyes, hair. They didn't see anything, but they were just there. His face was kind of almost like milk, and it would form over. These things would form over him, and and your first instinct is, "What? I can't believe that I am seeing this." And but this went on. Eventually these alien faces came through. Some of them were kind of reptilian-like. Some were more kind of like, some were almost ape-like. There was a whole variety of them, and there was no speaking going on. They just looked at you, which I find quite disconcerting. But they looked as if it's to say, "Yes, I am here," and letting you see me. And the thing that always perplexed me or bothered me was, are these spirits of dead aliens? Because there obviously must be spirits of dead people, because they look like people from the past. Are these spirits of dead aliens, or are these, as it were, spirits or whatever of living aliens, just as it were, coming through? So as I said, this went on for a couple of years, and various things happened. The whole room would like melt practically, sort of transform. It was really quite incredible. At times, you felt you moved into another dimension. So it was, for me, an amazing, disturbing experience, which I think about practically every day, trying to make sense of what I saw. And I wanted to. Some of the people did go, and had experiences of seeing these faces. So it wasn't just me, but I was the only person who went, consistently. And Ray actually asked me to write it down, what I had seen, because this was the thing. He could only feel these things happening. He didn't see these people. They were forming over him. He didn't actually see these people. So he was only aware of what had happened when I actually gave him the copy of the seance, which I wrote up after each seance, so it built up over the years. But it's always puzzled me, bothered me. And there's one thing that's convinced me about supernatural, or there are other worlds. It was my experience there. What it was, Paul, I don't know. And I've said in the book, look, I'm not asking anybody to believe me, because people have their own views, and people are skeptical. Fair enough, I understand that totally. But all I'm doing is putting out what I actually saw, and you can make of it, what you want.
Here's a question for you before I branch into the second and third questions that are already sitting in my head. First one, was it his actual face, as in physically changing there, or was it like an overlay put in front between him and your eyes, or was it your perception altered in your brain? What did you think was happening?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think he went over his face. Definitely, went over his face. You couldn't see his face; it disappeared. And occasionally, this sounds weird, but his face became like some giant white blob. As if it was just
White light sort of thing.
Yeah, it was a white blob. It was totally weird. And he could sometimes change physically. He seemed like he was sinking, and it was weird. So to me, it looked like a physical thing, but I wouldn't say absolutely was. It wasn't. That could have been happening in my brain. Maybe it was both of these things. You can feel the atmosphere of the room changing, the vibration. The room was absolutely vibrating. You could feel it yourself. And one time Ray said, do you want to have one of these, this happen to you? I said, well, not really.
Yeah.
I would try. So I said, all right, okay. And I could feel this weight coming down over my body, and I could feel my body starting to vibrate. I said to him, no, look, I don't want to go any further with this. I said, you do it. You seem to be able to cope with it. I don't think I could cope with this happening to me, because it was such a strange, I won't say it was an unpleasant feeling, but it was a kind of disturbing feeling. So I kind of chickened out on it, but in a way, I'm glad I did, because I don't know if I would have enjoyed that experience. But he survived it. He survived this, but seemed to do it. But as I said, it seemed to take quite a lot out of him. But he was doing this for me. As I said, I used to go, went there for a couple of years, so it was a regular occurrence.
Okay, so that leads me to the second question, which is, if you think it's sort of like happening there on him, did you get out a camera to try and take a photo, and would it work?
I didn't, and I honestly wish I had. Somebody did video it. Somebody else did video it, and there was a video of it, but I don't know, but it seems to have disappeared. But I didn't. And the reason why I didn't was because I didn't want to disturb anything. I didn't want to disturb it. I didn't try speaking to it because I didn't want to interrupt him. And, by the time it finished, yeah, I did. I mean, it was a bit of negligence on my part, but I was just so fascinated by what was going on. But as I said, somebody did take a video that seemed to show something happening, but I don't know where. It wasn't me that took it, unfortunately. And so that disappeared into the ether somewhere. I think it was shown on TV at one point, back in the past. But I don't know what happened to it. No, I know. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any video or camera evidence to prove, photographic evidence to prove what I saw.
No worries. When was this? How many years ago?
This is back in the 1990s.
Oh, okay, long time ago then. Is he passed on now, this chap?
Yeah, dead, unfortunately.
I was going to say, if he had have offered you a chance between the 90s and when he passed to said going back, would you go back and see it again?
No, because I had a disagreement with him at the end. I mean, I discussed this with another medium. He was bringing through person after person after person, and I said to him, he seems to have changed. When I first went, he was very affable, pleasant. He was always reasonably pleasant. He made me a cup of coffee, always gave me a biscuit. He said, because I know you like a chocolate biscuit, and so on and so forth. But yeah,
McVitie's, hopefully, was it one of the chocolate?
Yeah, well, it used to be a Kit Kat, actually. Yeah, branched
good
out.
Stuff.
Yeah, and I was saying, he seems to have changed. He said he was very affable. Then he seems to have got more irritable. He started demanding, do this, that, and the other. And eventually I said to him, Ray, I can't carry on like this. Either, we're doing this as a kind of 50-50 mutual thing. I'm not here to take orders from you about other things that you might want me to do, which he was doing. But it wasn't like that at the start. As I said to me, and her view, she said, no, what I think is happening is bringing through all these different personalities, and they're having an effect on his personality. They are changing him. She said, even though he might not realize it, she says, because he's doing it so often, it's bound to have this kind of effect on him. So at the end of the day, I said to Ray, I'm just going to pull the shutters down on this. We've done a lot. I didn't even know we could go. We've done so much. I didn't even know we could go any further. How much further we could take it. I do regret it. I do really regret the fact we didn't carry on. But at the time, it was just getting so stressful dealing with him and trying to kind of maintain things in an equilibrium with him. That I thought, no, we're going to have to stop. I didn't think about stopping permanently, to be honest about it. I thought maybe after a while we could go back, but then things just moved on, and we never did resume it. Unfortunately, he did want me to resume it, but I said, "Look, Ray, I'm just going to leave it for the time being." Because things, as I said, things got so heated at the end that I felt I didn't know if things would work as well. If we tried that contact again. But yeah,
No
I do regret not going back. But that's the way that ended, Paul.
That's life anyway, and doesn't necessarily always pan out the way you want. I have two more questions on this. The first of which is, do you think his personality was changed deliberately towards the negative? I.e., was that influence from wherever it was changing him to an agenda?
Well, that was the impression that I got. I mean, I'll come back to this point I raised before. I mean, like Ray, like all spirit mediums, or nearly all of them say, they have got a gatekeeper. And Ray would say this, that he had this gatekeeper, and this gatekeeper would not let, evil spirits or bad influences come through. And, I've always doubted that. I'm not completely convinced, that gatekeeper can offer 100% protection, or even that the gatekeeper is necessarily a good, if you like, spirit, if I use that expression. So I was always doubtful about who these people were, or what these people were that were coming through. As I said, some of these aliens didn't look friendly, and there's a whole range of things that came through. And his character did definitely change. I think he got more negative compared to the kind of person he'd been before. I don't know if that was part of a scenario that was being worked on, but I mean, I think he got more irritable, a bit more, more bad-tempered. I mean, he went down in that sense. So I wasn't sure if that was part of what he was doing. He was simply just getting a whole range of spirits through. Some might have been good, some might have been bad, or some that might have wanted to influence him. So yeah, I mean, I can say to my mind, 100% he was influenced in a not better way anyway, and that could have been part of a scenario. To be fair to Ray, he never tried to make any money out of it. Never asked for any money. Never went anywhere to do it. I mean, he was just basically doing it for himself, or for people who are interested, because he said he was trying to make people realize, that there was a world beyond our world, and in particular that there were aliens out there. And this is one of the things he was often talked about. We are part of a universe. We're just part of it. There are aliens out there, and we are all part of this alien world. So it had this kind of general, if you like, humanitarian view of the cosmos, and that's why I felt, towards the end, his behaviour was just so at odds with the way it started off with, and I thought, he is being influenced, but I don't know whether it was deliberate, Paul, whether it was just
side effect. Yeah. The aliens that are coming through, then, do you think that they are probably in the spirit world, and we're all in the same place?
Yeah,
essentially.
I got that impression.
Okay.
I mean, of course, simply that was part of the context. I heard these spirits of the dead coming through, and we had these alien beings coming through. So I thought, well, it's part of it, but because, and that that would have fitted in with a Ray scenario that we're all part of this cosmos, and there are alien beings. But then, on the other hand, I thought, well, they looked compared with the faces of the dead humans, they looked so alive. And this was the difference, you looked alive. I don't know why I got that impression, Paul. I got the impression, they looked like, as it were, contemporary beings that had come through. And I suppose, that was what was a bit disconcerting about it as well, that they looked like that. And I thought, well, why? If they are alive, how are they coming through? Why are they coming through? What they're trying to tell us. I mean, the whole thing could open up into quite a wide thing, with this whole idea of we're all part of this cosmos, and these alien beings are coming through to tell us, they are there, they're out there, what are they doing? They're watching us, they're trying to influence us. I mean, it's it could be quite disturbing implications from what I was seeing there.
So when they come through, these alien things, obviously you said they didn't move their mouths. What messages were they giving, and how were they giving it? Through him?
Yeah, well, they weren't given any message. There was no communication at all.
Oh, so it's just a face materializing and that's it.
Materialized. Yeah, that was it. There was no communication. Now somebody did say tried to communicate with them once. I didn't try. I only didn't try because Ray, I just wanted perfect kind of silence, and I didn't want to just, because of what was going on. I didn't want to disturb what was taking place or cause Ray any harm. I was concerned that some interruption might break contact, um, and uh, and do something to him in some way. But it was the way, particularly these alien faces, looked at you. They were solid, solid, and they would look at you. Absolutely no question.
Would they move their eyes?
They were just staring at you, just looking at you. I can't remember if they moved their eyes. At the top of my head, it was just the fact that you could see them so clearly, and they were looking at you. They were definitely looking at you in your direction, as if to say, "I am here." You want to look at me, fine, but I'm not interested. I'm not interested in you. I assumed they could see you. Maybe they couldn't. I don't know.
Whoa, throws up a lot of questions. If you were over there, like on the far side of the left of the room or the far side of the right, would they look in that direction?
Well, they would look at you. Yeah. Well, I mean, just where
That's
you were
weird.
slightly at an angle to Ray. More or less at the same spot, but maybe slightly different occasion. But they would be looking at you. No question about it. I've absolutely no doubt about that. They were looking at you as if to say, I am here. I can see you. I'm aware of you. That was the impression I got, the feeling I had from it. But I said that was an impression, a feeling. Um,
Who's to know if that's accurate or not? But yeah, we tend to have these feelings for a reason, don't we?
yeah, absolutely.
I have a skeptical question on it, and I'm just throwing this in the mix for people who would say this is a whole load of bunkum.
Yeah.
Was there a projector anywhere? Had you presumably looked around for all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, I looked around for that. I mean, he wasn't a well-off chap. He lived in a basic flat, basic room. There was nothing else there. When I looked around it, I mean, there was nothing anywhere that could be. Some people, have been saying, "Well, did he hypnotize you?" Well, my answer is no. I don't think he hypnotized me. I mean, I don't accept that as as an explanation for it. But I'm not totally ruling it out. But what I'm saying is, I went there for 2 years, and went in, and the thing started very quickly. You'd only sit down in the chair, look at him, and things would start up. So there was no lengthy, just sitting there for half an hour waiting for something to happen or anything. It all
Sure.
happened quickly, and it all passed fairly quickly as well. I mean, varied in length, but things went quite quickly. Faces appeared quite quickly. They didn't hang around for a long time. One face would come, then it would go, and it would be replaced by another face. And but I recounted all this in the book, giving a more detailed explanation of it.
Right, so I'm going to suggest everyone go check out the links in the description to that book because that clearly needs review. I'm going to branch out slightly into a different topic, which is conferences and speaking engagements. Do you do any of those?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, we've got an annual. If people ask me, we've got an annual conference in Scotland, Scottish UFO Paranormal Conference. So I speak at that. That's on an annual basis, and then if people ask me to talk, sure, I'm quite happy to talk. I've got various sort of say slideshows, using the old expression, various slideshows of talks that I've given on UFOs, famous Scots and the supernatural, Scottish monsters, and I mean a whole range of topics that I'm interested in. Yeah, so I'm always happy to give those.
On a personal basis, do you get more out of the speaking engagements or the writing of your books?
To be honest about it, writing has always been a thing I've been most interested in. Putting it down on paper. I mean, I've done a lot of talks over the years. Quite happy to do that. But I suppose my main focus is on writing. And which I've always found something that I've been interested in. In doing, getting it down on paper. has, always been a challenge.
No,
As
I
everybody
understand.
knows.
We'll take another sideways little slant here. What would you say ghosts actually are?
Oh, geez, Paul, that's a massive, massive topic, isn't
Come
it?
on, you've got the answer.
There's so many, there's so many interpretations. Yeah, well, I think these must be some kind of projection from the spirit world of some form or another, because so many people have seen them. And I know so many people who have seen them that I know there must be something there that's going on. People claim they recognize spirits of their families, but not necessarily spirits of their family, spirits of everything. So I guess that there must be some projection or somehow something coming through from the spirit world. There's some suggestion, of course, that certain people are being attracted or to a particular place and they can't escape it, and it's the kind of soul or whatever, the ethereal part of their whatever they were keeps wandering along. So, I mean, there may be various explanations. Maybe there isn't one explanation fits all. I mean, I'd guess that would be the case because there's so many variety of spirit or ghost experiences reported.
I'm going to be equally as hard on you by asking you, and what do you think UFOs are?
Uh, that again is such a big big question because there's so many explanations to what it. I think first of all, let me say I am sure people are actually having these experiences, seeing UFOs. I mean, a lot obviously, and people say they've seen a light in the sky. They can't explain it. That could be just anything. That could be anything, and I think we have to accept it's very difficult to either have that confirmed as a UFO, if it's a spacecraft or whatever. But then you've got people who had close-up sightings. I mean, Bob Taylor and other people from right across the world are seeing these things or had encounters with alien entities. So I think there is something there. But whether we are talking about nuts and bolts spacecraft, obviously, is questionable because to travel vast distances from other planets, unless they've invented or devised some, super advanced technology, which may be the case, you have to doubt they'd be able to travel here. It doesn't seem likely to me. But again, coming back to our old favorite of the portal or something from other dimensions or interaction with other universes, multi-universes, which even scientists, are accepting as a possibility, that, this could be the case. So there could be something like that. I mean, it could be some, you see people, see UFOs disappear in a second. So you think, well, maybe that is a portal into another world. And that's what they're seeing. Things are popping in and out. They may not even realize they are popping in and out of our world. Against that, I have some queries about the whole UFO thing. This is where people, and I've investigated cases like this, I've seen a UFO, bursting out what seems jet flames. So like a UK spaceship, but coming from the future. And that, to my mind, seems decidedly odd. So things like that I find hard to explain. But I mean, the sheer volume of sightings suggests something's going on. Close-up encounters suggest something's going on. The fact that sometimes people just see a UFO for a comparatively short period of time suggests something's going on. And this something could be, from another dimension, from another world. This might explain things, like may explain ghosts or Loch Ness monster. So maybe in a sense, these things are connected up in some way.
Yeah, that's where my mind, seems to be going, especially from speaking to people like Steve Mera, who he investigates this, what he calls the, paranormal physics, the physics of the paranormal. And I like that aspect, that it's all one thing, and how do we understand it? I love that thing. Before I get to a really important question, back to the Ray Todd scenario. In your 30 years of investigating, what conclusions are you drawing? What ultimately is the bigger picture? What do you think everything is?
Well, I think the bigger picture is there are other worlds out there. You know, the universe is a more complex place than we can imagine. We don't really know very much about the universe at all. You know, what's out there. I mean, what other worlds we might be interacting with. And I think that is where the solution or the answer to this issue might arise from. You know, that we live in a complex universe. You know, there are other things interacting with our world that we're simply not aware of because of our limited perception of what's going on. You know, we don't really understand the universe. We don't know a lot about it. So, I mean, to my mind, there could well be other things. There must be other things going on that we just don't take account of in our daily lives.
I agree with you. It is all perception. I think there's massive things going on, but we're not focused on it for the most part. As a race, I mean, as a species. Yeah. The important question back to Ray Todd was about the biscuits, because obviously that's really important. Over that 2-year period, did he start with like a high-end chocolate digestive, and at the end it was a crapper biscuit that you got offered?
I really can't remember it totally, to be honest about it. But I mean, certainly, generally speaking, he'd give me a Kit Kat, or give me the famous Kit Kat. You know, yeah. If we couldn't get him a Kit Kat, I'd apologise and give me another biscuit instead. But generally speaking, yeah. But as I said, I mean, I would say, you know, we can see he got less caring as things progressed. I mean, that would be my impression of what was going on. I think it maybe kind of took me for granted, or he was starting to, I don't know. You know, he seemed to get more, I don't know, I say bigger ideas. You know, he seemed to, when he started off, he just seemed to see himself as, you know, part of this, small part of this. Things went on, he started to get, big-headed isn't the word for it, because he never sort of went out trying to boast about himself. We didn't even want mentioned, generally speaking, anywhere, which is why, you know, I had to wait till he was deceased before I wrote about this properly, put it out. And but I mean, he got a bit more bombastic. You know, he changed. There's no question about it. He did change. And before this medium suggested it was the coming through, all these personalities were coming through, I did wonder, not about the personalities, but I wondered if it was just the sheer fact of doing this, you know, all the time. It had some kind, because of the change in vibrations, the change of atmosphere in the room. I just wondered if this had infected him, because I would leave and go home, you know, and he'd be left. I presume, I don't know how, if, you know, vibrations or whatever it was in the room stayed on. I suspected it maybe did for a while, but he carried on doing that, you know, on a regular basis. Then, you know, suggests you might get some, you know, you might have some physical effect or some mental effect, you know, which would be longer term.
I'm still going to hark back onto the biscuit side of things, because we're sort of branching out towards the Koit zone, which has also silly questions in. But if less caring could be measured on a scale of biscuits, and we'll call a Kit Kat a HEB or a high-end biscuit, what's the worst biscuit that would be the less caring biscuit to you?
A non-chocolate biscuit, like a digestive or
a
plain biscuit, or something I don't like you know, those biscuits. I don't like bourbons, for example.
Oh, bourbons, yeah, they're a bit weird, aren't they? A bit weird taste.
Yeah, no, I'm not keen on them. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I do believe he took me for granted. Started taking me for granted later on, you know, in this thing, and he did get a bit less caring. But I honestly can't remember whether he stopped giving me a biscuit or not.
Sorry, I'm focused on the biscuits, but it's important to me.
Anything back from me, I know that. I did give him a cigar once, but that was about it. But
if we came to your house, Ron, what would be on the plate of biscuits at your house?
On the plate of biscuits, I'd have a selection. You know, definitely chocolatey biscuits, good thick chocolatey biscuits. You know, to make sure Yeah, I wouldn't. Maybe I have one or two plain ones because not everybody surprisingly likes chocolate biscuits.
I know, they're wrong uns though, aren't they, those people?
Yeah, well, I find that a bit odd. I mean, who
Yeah.
doesn't like chocolate biscuit? I always make sure you get chocolate biscuits. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing cheap. Good old solid ones. Those chocolatey thick ones. I can't remember what
Nice
they call.
McVitie's ones, yeah, exactly. All right, I'm going to ask you one question before we branch out into the Koit zone, which is, like I said, where all the weird questions lie. It's a question I like to ask everyone, and you kind of have to ignore the Ray Todd scenario here. So when I ask you what strange things have happened to you, it could be anything, seeing a ghost, seeing a UFO, anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't seen a UFO. I mean, not a lot of strange things have happened to me. If I'm being honest about it, apart from, following up on other people's experiences. I mean, generally speaking, I've led a fairly, fairly quiet life. I mean, if I do say things have happened to me, it's because of like spirit contact that the people I've had. And, for example, I went along to a spiritualist meeting once, and it was a couple who were doing it. And during that week, up at the university, they had, used to give us a Times higher educational supplement, which I never read apart from the book reviews, to see if anything interesting was coming out. And I was reading this book review about a labyrinth, and I had a picture of a labyrinth on it. So anyway, so I read this book review, and I didn't think anything further of it. I was at this meeting, and there was this couple. This woman said, there's a light over your head. And I almost never got any messages anytime. She said, there's a chap here, he's got a beard. He's Irish. And I thought, oh, God, I have no idea. But I just said politely, I said, oh, yeah, right, okay. I don't know, I don't know of any Irish ancestors I've got at all. So she said, he wants to prove that he's been standing beside you. And she said, I can see you're looking at something. All I can describe it as a maze. And I was just absolutely knocked back, as I thought, maze, labyrinth, and that link, I just thought, how on earth has that come out of the ether? That she can see a maze. I was looking at a picture of a labyrinth. I mean, the similarity is obvious, Yeah, I forgot about it. I thought, God, was it telepathy? But I wasn't thinking about it at the time. I said, but who is this chap? I had no idea. It didn't ring any bells with me at all. I could not understand it yet. She'd come out with this, seen this picture of a maze. So that really, really knocked me back, And I thought, well, something's gone on there, but what? I asked around, have you got any Irish ancestry? We've got English, Welsh ancestry, but no Irish ancestry that anybody knew of. But maybe she misinterpreted it. I thought Irish. Sometimes people think, people from up north, Gaelic folks sound Irish at times. I thought, was she misinterpreting the accent? Because I would understand maybe I've had, somebody from further up the north of Scotland or something. But anyway, so I mean, it's things like that kind of, as I said, kind of knock you.
They leave a lasting impression. Okay, Ron, we are now entering the Koit zone. Koit zone!
Yeah.
Now, we know this is going to be a weird question, so just bear with. Favourite sweets or chocolate for you?
Favourite sweets? Oh God, I've got so many, to be honest about it. Favourite sweets? Well, anything that's extremely chocolatey. Mars bar. I'm always up for a Mars bar. Yep.
I'm always up for a Mars bar. Now, there's a clip for you. That goes on your gravestone.
Yeah, I was up for a Mars bar, yeah.
Go with that then. When you pass on, do you want to be a ghost?
I no particular desire to be a ghost, to be honest about it, because it seems like a somewhat aimless existence. I mean, I don't mind going to a spirit world. If there's a spirit world there, if there's one that's described by Swedenborg, where there's everything we've got here is there, so it would be familiar. And I'd meet all these people, all my relatives and friends who have gone before me. Well, if I don't go before them, of course. And so that would be okay. because I can imagine a world like that, but I can't imagine a world where you're sort of wandering around aimlessly. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't fancy being a ghost anyway. No.
What did that chap say the other world was? Was it just existing as energy and you perceive all these things, or was it another physicality where you could eat and stuff there?
He's Ray. Yeah, Ray didn't express any view of it. All he said was, yeah, these is other worlds. There is a spirit world. I mean, that's beyond, didn't say anything beyond that. It didn't seem to have said any kind of philosophy about anything or any kind of general view of, the practicalities of it all. So I think from what he was saying that he kind of believed in a sort of spirit world, in that vague sense that a lot of people do.
Fair enough. If you weren't an investigator and author, and you were funneled in a sports direction for your life, which event would you have chosen?
Which events? Well, I was always interested. Well, football obviously was the thing that I was kind of interested. I played a bit of rugby too, and I like cricket, but we never got much chance to play cricket in Scotland, unfortunately. But yeah, football, I guess, would be something I'd go for.
And did you play football presumably occasionally?
Yeah, I played occasionally. Yeah, we been at schools. I was at secondary schools. We had to play rugby. They weren't keen on us playing football, which is funnily enough, the general case in Scotland. The chariot, the rugby rather than football. So I did play rugby, and I kind of enjoyed playing rugby. But I mean, football. I played for the school primary team. I was down in Wales, lived in Wales when I was a kid, and I played for the school primary team there.
Yeah, we had the same. When I was at school, it was a grammar school that made you do rugby. Yeah. And for someone of my size, I didn't want to do rugby. Getting smashed by all the bigger chaps, no, sod that.
Yeah. I'm not big either. So I was a good bit slimmer and quicker. So I used to go and centre a wing, So
no, that's what they forced me to do because I could run fast. But hey, I never liked it. What is your favourite film?
My favourite film is Excalibur.
Oh, aye.
It's a film about King Arthur.
Yeah. Lush. What is your most treasured possession? As in item, not demon possession.
What is my most treasured possession? Oh God. Well, I've got one or two things, but I recently acquired a statue of an Egyptian goddess. Yeah, I'll show you.
You have to show it to us now. Oh, aye, that's cool.
Yeah, cool, eh?
What's that one called?
Oh, God, I've forgotten the name.
Steve.
It's busted. I could.
Okay, not heard of that one.
Yeah,
that's nice.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, my wife got that for me.
Fair play. On an animal basis now, what animal or insect annoys you the most?
Well, insect, flies, or bluebottles. Hate them.
Yeah, buggers, aren't they?
Yeah, I never don't like them at all. Put up with this other thing.
So, what is the grossest thing you've eaten?
Mussels. And I ate snails once, and that was, I suppose, when I'd almost forgotten about it. Now you remind me.
Equally gross. Yeah.
Yes. Oh God. Yeah. I didn't realize they'd ordered it. And the thing was, because I was in this French restaurant, and I knew escargot meant snails. I don't know how I didn't even think about it. I just ordered, they'll have the escargot. These bloody snails turned up in these big snail shells. Oh, I had to pick it out. I thought, God, I paid for this. I'll have to eat it.
Oh God, no, I wouldn't. I can sod off on my plate. I ain't having that. I'm very picky, and I know you said you eat anything.
Yeah, anything apart from shell. I don't like shellfish. I mean, I'll eat it, but I mean, I wouldn't choose to eat it except by accident.
Do you swallow them and do you have to chew them?
Well, you can do either. I can't remember what. I think I just sort of squashed them about in my mouth.
Gross, absolutely gross. Who from history, dead or alive, would you really like to meet?
Who would I like to meet? Oh, there's a whole pile of them, but I mean, I'd like to meet. I'd like to meet Robert the Bruce. He, who fought for Scottish independence, just out of pure curiosity. Because not a huge amount is known about him really. It'd be interesting to find out how he saw things and how he saw the struggle and so on. So he's one person I would like to meet, but there's so many. You start thinking about it because you read about people, but you like to get your own personal perspective on what their view of things was. There's a whole range of people.
Yeah, there probably is for me as well. Can pigs actually fly? I.e., do they do it in secret when we're not looking?
Yeah, could be. Yeah, I've always wondered about this. I used to take a walk round about up a hill near here, and there was a farm there, and they kept pigs on the farm, and there was this Vietnamese pig. He used to go. You walk by it, and he used to sort of run up to you, like to be stroked. And I thought, God, it almost seemed like he wanted to speak to you. They got the impression of intelligence there. So I've always wondered, if pigs do have supernatural powers.
Oh, they do. Trust me. It's like I always say to my girlfriend, cows, right? They've actually got a lot of weapons. They always carry rifles and machine guns and stuff to keep you off their land. That's what cows have. So you've got to be careful of animals. They're more than meet the eye.
Yeah.
What is your favourite coin?
My favourite coin?
Yeah.
Yeah, blimey. I used to like the £1 coin. Yeah.
When you had some, yeah?
Yeah, when I had some, don't have any. Well, I look at my wallet, there's no money and no cash in it at all these days.
That's life these days, isn't it? Where everything's going cashless. Which reminds me to ask you this question: would you pay for things with your mobile phone? So I don't want to do that.
No, I don't do it. No, I mean, you see this. I mean, the mobile phone is brilliant, okay, but I don't do banking on it for the simple reason. I know people have lost their mobile phones. The hassle of trying to sort it out is just incredible.
Exactly.
I've been days trying to do it. So I thought, no, I don't mind doing internet banking, but I'm not doing mobile phone banking until they force me to, which they might do one day, the way they go on.
Well, we can still say no, and I'm going to be one of those no's along with you.
Try to say no as well.
Okay, that's the end of the Koit Zone, so thank you for answering those strange and weird questions.
Yeah.
Leaves me two final questions, as always. So, what activities or guilty pleasures do you like to get up to when you're not investigating or authoring?
Guilty pleasures. Well, yeah, I have a guilty pleasure of eating things that aren't good for me, like cakes, scones, anything with a huge amount of sweetness in it, which I should really avoid. Yeah, but I can't help it. That is definitely my guilty pleasure.
Cool. Now we're going to have to talk about that quickly. Cakes, right? I don't go down the scone route, but what is your cake of choice?
Anything with a lot of chocolate on it. Yeah, so a bit of chocolate cake, I'm absolutely up for it, definitely, yeah.
Anything you can get your hands on, yeah, is just going to be piled into your mouth.
Yes, anything chocolatey, yes. My wife tries to control anything like that, make sure I don't eat too much chocolate, but, on the sly, so to speak, get tucked into something if I'm out with somebody having a cup of coffee.
Do you know where all our hiding places are in the house for the sweets?
Yes, of course. Nobody can hide a sweet, can they?
No, you can sniff that a mile off.
If you're determined, you'll find them.
Damn straight. And that leads us on to the last question. What are you currently working on? What's next?
I'm working on a book with Malcolm Robinson. We're doing a joint book on the Bonnie Bridge UFO phenomena. So that's nearly at an end. So I'm hoping that will be out. Maybe it'll be next year now, or later this year possibly. But anyway, so we've been doing that.
Super. Ron, thank you ever so much for coming on KoitCast. It's really appreciated your time. What I would say before we say our goodbyes is to anyone listening, watching, check out the links in the description to Ron's stuff. Go and get involved with the books. Great stuff to be had there. Great stuff to be mined. So Ron, thank you ever so much for your time.
No, thank you, Paul, for having me on. It's been, I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. And me too. Thank you ever so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.